Hi, I'm Drew D'Amelia, and today's movie is Arrival. Arrival is a movie that's in theaters this week, and it sure is an interesting title given that my show is arriving with the first review of a movie called Arrival. It was a total accident. I thought Arrival was good. It's a movie about learning a language, and because I like linguistics, which is the study of language, it appealed to me in that way. Now, that might not make the movie sound terribly appealing to people that aren't into linguistics, which I can totally understand, learning a language. But they decided to jazz it up by making it a movie about learning an alien language, which I appreciate, taking a concept that some might not find so fascinating and making it fascinating by adding something creative to it. I mean, making tissue boxes might not sound like a terribly appealing thing unless you're into making tissue boxes, but what if you were making tissue boxes out of baby skulls? There you go. So much more interesting. It was honestly fascinating to me to see the humans we were following trying to learn the alien language and vice versa, the aliens trying to learn the human language. I really liked that. It was a very detailed process, and they really started from scratch because they had never communicated before. And again, having it be with aliens just made it all the more fascinating to me. I actually would have liked it if the whole movie had been like that, and it was for a while, but then just as you were really starting to get interested and going, wow, I wonder how they're gonna break more language barriers, they skipped over a whole lot of the progress, which was really jarring because they had been being very detail-oriented with how they were depicting this progress, and then all of a sudden they decided to throw in some narration from a character that had never narrated before and never narrates again in the movie, and just skip over all of it. I don't know if they were trying to do it for pacing, but it really kind of bothered me. There were still aspects of learning language that occurred afterward, but it was a confusing move in the movie. I will say that it did have, at the end, a very interesting twist on what can happen when you learn a language. Something that I've never seen before in a movie. I thought it was a really cool idea, provocative and not in the annoying way. In fact, the whole movie, mostly provocative and not in the annoying way. It makes you think, not too much, not about, oh, why did this happen? So, I do think that the concept the movie had deserved to be a feature film, but again, I do really wish it had more focused on the whole aspect of trying to learn a language, because instead what it opted to do is kind of try to inject some action, I felt. I mean, at one point you have this one soldier character, because this is sort of army-based, and I guess some rogue soldiers led by this character that was just sort of introduced out of nowhere, and I didn't get it. They put a bomb in the room where this language interaction was taking place between the humans and the aliens, and so you saw that the bomb was in there for one of these scenes, but then it's just the aliens and the humans communicating with each other, and there's just a bomb in there, and I went, why, what, why is there, why? It was just, I read that it said detonation, and I didn't even really believe it, because it just felt so pointless and odd that they were throwing action into a movie that really didn't feel like an action movie, and it really isn't an action movie at all. And then there were other moments where you kind of saw the consequences of these alien ships that had landed in different parts of the world. They were showing how different countries would react to that. And I can't say that that was a bad thing, because I do think that that's an interesting thing to try to talk about and can add some tensions to trying to communicate with these aliens. But, you know, at that point, once they had thrown learning the language mostly out the window, it felt like they were trying to supplant the meat of the story, in my opinion, with action that I didn't really care that much about. If it had been supplementary, that would have been one thing, but it started to feel like it was the primary drive of the movie at that point, and I don't know, I wasn't completely into it. It was alright, and again, there was still some language learning that was going on, so it felt supplementary to a degree, but there was a lot of questionable stuff. I also wish the characters were more interesting. I kept finding myself wishing that they had delved into these characters we were following more. I mean, a lot of them were doctors and very good at what they did, and they had a very interesting backgrounds, but it didn't dive into what that background was at all. And it might have been interesting to just get glimpses of it and learn about who they were through small, little, subtle hints, but I don't know, I just never felt like I knew them enough, and in terms of their personalities, there wasn't too much to cling on to. Not that that was tremendously important in this movie, but I do think it really would have been more beneficial if it felt like there was more of a character. Like, these characters just, I don't know, they felt real, but they felt a little bit plain to me. I'm also confused about the main character, who was played by Amy Adams, because she started off as very timid, but then she just kind of suddenly became very headstrong and confident, and it was just an odd transition to me. I wasn't sure exactly how or why that happened. And I do have to admit, some of the dialogue was kind of not great. It felt like what I call setup dialogue. It's dialogue where one character is saying a line, and you can tell that that line is there just to set up another character saying another line of dialogue, so then that first character can then go on to say something. It didn't feel like a realistic conversation. It definitely felt written at times, which was jarring in a movie that was mostly focused on being very realistic. I mean, this movie would do things that I appreciate in movies, where it would add a lot of little subtle details that don't seem important, but would really help immerse you in the world. For instance, the humans had to wear suits when they were going to communicate with the aliens, and they made a remark about how uncomfortable the suits are. And I'm thinking, you know, that's not something that I ever really think about when I see people wearing suits, but the fact they commented on it made it seem like it was a realistic thing. Like, yeah, it would be uncomfortable, wouldn't it? And that just helps immerse you when they add in these little flares that remind you of, you know, the human experience and make the whole movie feel a lot more lifelike. I also have to say the sound design I thought was particularly good. I think there were a lot of moments where the sound was just pretty impressive. Alright, so here's some quick nitpicks. At one point, Amy Adams' character toward the beginning of the movie turned on the news where they were talking about the aliens, and there was a shot where you could see that her students that she taught were behind her watching the TV, and so was Amy Adams. But Amy Adams was right in the center of the shot, and the shot you saw beforehand showed that the TV was right in front of Amy Adams, so it was implying that Amy Adams was just right the fuck in front of the TV, and I'm thinking, wouldn't the students be pissed off that their teacher's right in front of the TV? What's going on there? Then, I could be wrong about this, somebody tell me if I am wrong, but there was kind of a counter that you would see in the news footage, like, Alien Invasion Day 25, or Alien Invasion Day 5. Now, I think the first time I saw it, it said Alien Invasion Day 5, but then the next time I saw it, I swear, and maybe I'm wrong, that it said Alien Invasion Day 4, and there wasn't a very strong reason to suggest that that news footage was from previous days. I mean, I suppose it possibly could have been, but it was confusing. I don't know, it feels like a detail that the filmmakers really couldn't mess up. They would have noticed that at some point, right? But that was odd. I have some potentially spoilery nitpicks, so if you don't want to hear those, skip here. There's a warning. So in the movie, when the aliens speak, there's a very interesting and visual way that the humans decode what they're saying without using subtitles. But then toward the end of the movie, you know, you don't really have that technology that the humans are using, so the movie just suddenly uses subtitles, and I know that they kind of had to, and I can't really think of a workaround for that, but it was sort of jarring to just see blunt alien subtitles all of a sudden. There's also time travel in this movie, which was part of the twist, and I liked the twist a lot, but this comes up a lot in time travel movies. There's just this inconsistency, a paradox, and it didn't make sense, and it bothered me. Let me try to break this down for you guys. So, basically Amy Adams had a vision of the future. And in the future, a character said, "Hey, you made me change my mind because you said these words." And then Amy Adams in the present was trying to figure out what those words were, and she didn't know what those words were until that character from the future said those words in the vision. But if you think about that, that just doesn't make sense, because in the timeline, you have Amy Adams in the present, and even if she has a vision of the future, in that vision, she knew what the words were without this guy telling her what the words were. So how did she ever know what those words were in the present? It just doesn't make sense. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but it's stupid. It just doesn't work. It actually breaks the whole fucking movie if you think about it, and it's a real problem. But, you know, it's just a nitpick. Overall, I thought it was a fine movie. I think it was a bit slow, and I think the action was a bit distracting, but even if it had just been a movie about learning a language like I would have wanted, it still was going to be a little bit slow, and I don't think it ever would have been anything too spectacular, but there's interesting stuff in it that I haven't seen in another movie, so I suppose you should go see it. That's all from me. Now get the fuck out of my house.